Right, and staying with that story, the Department of Correctional Services has confirmed that the woman who kidnapped Zephany nurse some 25 years ago, Levona Solomons, is undergoing the parole process. Now, the hearings were attended by both the nurse and Solomons victims' families as victims in the matter. The Correctional Supervision and Parole Board has, however, deemed that Solomons will need to undergo further interventions as part of her rehabilitation path. The board ruled that she must also still engage in the victim-offender dialogue. Solomons is currently serving a 10-year sentence for taking the 3-day-old child from a Cape Town hospital in 1997. Nurse was reunited with her biological family 17 years after her abduction. To unpack this, I'm joined by the Department of Correctional Services spokesperson, Singabakho Nxumalo. Very good evening to you. Thank you for your time. Singabakho, pardon me, Nxumalo. Thank you for your time, sir. Let's talk about some of the considerations that were made ahead of this process now being granted.
A very good evening, and thank you for having us. What we have explained in the statement, one was to confirm that there was indeed a parole hearing involving the inmate and the victims. And in this case, we illustrate that the Solomons and the nurse families are all victims, and they were there, and they were afforded an opportunity to make a representation. And the parole board listened to everything, looked at the profile that was presented before them, and they took a decision that other interventions are still required before Levona Solomons could be placed on parole. And they've given her a period of 12 months to undergo those interventions and then come back. And once more, to state that not every inmate that goes before the parole board is immediately placed on parole. There is work that has to be done, and the parole board has to be convinced that the person being placed out does meet the criteria. Hence, we even issued this statement because out there in the public, people feel that any person who goes before the parole board is indeed granted parole.
And we know that the Correctional Supervision and Parole Board deemed that Solomons will need to undergo further interventions as part of her rehabilitation path. What will that mean?
Okay. When an inmate is admitted, we draw what we call a correctional sentence plan, which will indicate the type of programs that will have to be serviced by an inmate. It also has to illustrate what type of assessments that must be conducted by our specialists. So when an inmate goes before the parole board, they then take that correctional sentence plan vis-a-vis what is then presented in terms of the programs that the inmate may have attended, and also the assessment reports from our specialists. It will then indicate the state of readiness, whether the inmate in front of them is ready to be placed out. But they also have to take into consideration presentations from the victims, and also even the level of readiness from an inmate in terms of how far or the level of appreciation if this person fully comprehend the harm that he or she may have caused, and also the part that this person is to undertake once placed out, and also the support system that this person will receive once out there. And what was critical here with this particular case was that the victim-offender dialogue was still outstanding, and more so because it involves families, and it's people who are likely even to cross paths moving forward. So in the spirit of harmony and safer communities, it was deemed important that it has to be done so that at least the perpetrator and the victims start to find ways of forgiving one another, living together. It's something that may not happen in a short period of time, but the process has to start so that post-incarceration, at least the level of anger and whichever way they may feel towards each other, at least there is a favorable space within which they can start to engage up until such time that they can say, we can put together what happened between us and move on.
And when is this expected to start, or is it underway already?
These interventions will be undertaken in the 12 months period, meaning that they have to start from tomorrow until July 2023, when the inmate will have to again go before the parole board. So when the inmate goes in July 2023, the profile will have to indicate that the interventions that the parole board outlined have been fulfilled, and that even processes like the victim offender dialogue has also been undertaken. Then the parole board will have to look into that and see whether the inmate is now ready to be placed out and what will be the conditions. Again, I must say that it doesn't guarantee that the parole board will say, no, indeed, you are placed out. It has to be satisfied that this person will adjust in the normal life out there, and that the risk element could be dealt with, so that the type of conditions that are attached to this person does then assist in this person now starting to live like a law-abiding citizen, and also the community where this person will reside to start accepting that yes, this person went to a correctional facility, is now a changed person, and this person can start make a positive contribution in that society, and that the victims as well, can find space to engage if there's still a need for that. But what eventually must be done is that a person has to be corrected, and that victims must find an avenue to say, no, at least we're there, we did participate in the process. Some may be happy, some may not, but with time. Hence, the issue of restorative justice is important, so that even if people are now engaging in an open setup, but at least the environment is conducive for them to engage.
I mean, you can create that enabling, conducive environment, but what about the response from the nurse family? Are they willing to engage and also find a way forward?
The reason why they even participated today in the parole hearing is part and parcel of that particular process, to say you may be aggrieved, you may be hurting, and it's a very sensitive one, but to say we need to start with that process, and we don't put people under pressure. Hence, we don't even create a timeline to say, do this victim offender dialogue now, so that by the following day you are considered when you are placed out. We say, let us create this conducive environment, and we understand that people differ. Some with time may say, at least now I've gone through that. Or someone may say, I've got particular questions that I want to ask the perpetrator, and I'm expecting answers. That is part and parcel of, people finding ways to engage. Maybe they can even forgive one another, but that environment has to be created, because more often crime happens between people who know each other, or people who reside within the same locality. So for us to, as a country, to have cohesive communities where people can live in peace, it's important that restorative justice does find expression.
So how much then of an impact will the nurse family's decision or perhaps outcome have on whether or not Levona Solomons is then granted parole in the end?
Everything does contribute towards a decision that eventually has to be taken. When I say everything, I mean the correctional sentence plan will have particular programs that will be detailed in the rehabilitation path of an inmate. It will also indicate the assessments that must be done. It will also indicate the participation by the victims and the statements that they will make. Then the parole board will have to go through all of these. There's quite a number of variables that they look into, then eventually make a decision. They do not just pick on one particular element and say, because of this one particular program that was completed, we place this person out, or because of one statement where people are saying, no, this person must die in prison, therefore this person must never be released. They have to look at everything in its totality, and then deem it whether this person is a candidate to be placed out. What is the level of risk? Do we have measures that we can manage that particular risk? What is the level of support that this person will receive once placed out in the community? And can we monitor this person? Then that will assist in terms of the decision that they will have to make. But everything has to be weighed in, and the decision has to be taken. Hence, we have these different variables, so that at the end of the day, you do not find a situation where an inmate is disadvantaged merely because of one particular element. You have to look at all these variables. Then the parole board will decide on what is the likelihood in terms of placing this person out, reoffending, or this person abiding by the parole conditions, and indeed demonstrating that he or she has been corrected and is now prepared to live as a law-abiding citizen.
Yeah, very well. Thank you so much for weighing in there. Department of Correctional Services spokesperson Singabakho Nxumalo.